am going to talk about collaborative learning. So you're seeing the right screen, right? Thanks. Okay, so Ohio Wesleyan is doing everything all at the same time. So we have some courses that are fully remote. We have some courses that are hybrid courses where we have some people in person in class and some people that are virtual at the same time. And then we have some flexibility. And I had some of my courses run with everybody in person all the time because it was a small group of students. So it was an exciting fall. It was my first semester teaching full time, so it was a big learning curve. But it was really exciting and different. So I am going to share in the chat if I can get back to that. A link to the presentation, and the link has everything hyperlinked. So it's a PDF of the full presentation. So if there's anything you want to look at where the research came from or examples of what I did in my classes, it's all there for you. If you prefer QR codes, I've got a QR code for you too. I'm also a techie person and a literacy person, so that will be obvious. So my goals for today are to give you just broad strokes about why collaborative learning is so important, walk you through what a jigsaw strategy is, which I'm sure some of you have heard of before, and then identify strategies to incorporate collaborative and cooperative learning opportunities in remote, hybrid, and socially distanced classrooms. And I'll share some of my experiences trying to make it all work. So there has been lots of research on cooperative learning versus like competitive and individualistic learning. There's been some massive, if I could talk, it would help, meta-analyses that give us some really great data about cooperative learning. And so what we know, this article that I've got a link to is a great summary of those big meta-analyses and gives you kind of some directions for thinking about your cooperative learning. But the big takeaways are that cooperative learning, when students are working together in groups, it promotes socialization. Students need to develop their social skills so that they can be successful in life. And you want them to have those skills to be able to negotiate and work with others, etc. It also improves academic achievement. If students are not actively engaging with the content and doing something with it, it's not going to stick. It increases motivation because they get the opportunity to engage with their peers. And then there's also benefits around personal self-development. So a warning, I'm a literacy person, so I come at everything thinking about the language that students are using and how we get them to be able to use the discourse of your content area, whatever your content area is. So why are these discussions and activities so important? We know that up to 85% of a student's test score can be attributed to their vocabulary knowledge of those content standards. So that means that their ability to understand and use the terminology is really powerful. And the best way to get them familiar with those vocabulary terms and those concepts and those ideas is to talk about them and to use them in various ways. And so collaborative learning tasks provide authentic opportunities for students to use those terms in context. So Jigsaws came out of research from Texas when they were first integrating schools. So Professor Aronson and his students from the University of Texas were trying to help schools deal with all of this animosity going on between different racial groups. And so for the first time, they had Black students, Hispanic students, and white students all in the same schools. And the quality of education that students were getting before that was greatly unequal. And so what they found was that the same students were getting called on all the time and getting more and more practice talking about the material. So they devised the jigsaw. And so in a jigsaw, students all are responsible for the material. So what it looks like is you have your students in expert groups. So you have one group, the first round, they are with their expert group. And in their expert group, they become experts on one aspect of the topic. So for example, if you're talking about history and students are learning about Eleanor Roosevelt, you might have like a biography that the students are reviewing. One group might focus on her childhood. Another might focus on her life with Franklin and their children. Another about her life after he got polio, another with her work as the First Lady, and then a final piece about after he passed. So in their expert group, they would focus on one of those aspects. Then you mix up the groups. So each group has one student who's an expert in each area. In my classes, one of the things we talk about is educational technology. So there's a great podcast about educational technology, and every year, it's called Cult of Pedagogy. Every year, the podcaster has a best tech of the year. And so each group was assigned, each expert group was assigned 1 year, and then they examined all of the tools, and then we mixed up the groups, and then they taught the other people about the best tools that they learned about. So they had an opportunity to become experts in their particular year. And then they also had the opportunity to learn from other people in the class about other tools that might be beneficial. The thing about a jigsaw is everyone needs to have buy-in and to have a reason that they are participating. And so after they've completed the group work, they need to have something that you can see that demonstrates their understanding. So the way that I found this year to monitor and capture their group discussions with my fully remote classes, I was at a loss. We would have group discussions. They would go off into the void of breakout rooms. I would pop in and they would be on task or not. Usually they were. We have pretty on task type students at my university, but sometimes they would have a misunderstanding that if I hadn't popped in, I wouldn't have been able to jump in and help. So I started using Google Docs to capture and monitor their understanding. So on these shared Google Docs, I've got some examples here. The links are in the comments. And so what I did was I just copied over them into the PowerPoint. So one of the things I was teaching them was text-dependent questions. So they read this article about Stalin, and then they wrote one question for each level of text-dependent questions, and then they wrote their names in the speaker's notes. So for on the left side of the screen is the general understandings, key details. Those are the types of questions they had to write. And then with their group, they wrote one of each. I was able to watch their conversations real time, even if they were in video groups, because I had access to the Google Doc. So if there was a group that had a question or didn't understand, or their example was completely off base, I could jump in and discuss with them, explain what was wrong and how to correct that. And that's just an example of a blank slide. Oh, the next slide is messed up. Sorry. So then I also had Google Docs that were just regular Google Docs with directions on top. So, generic, someone will take notes while you facilitate, and then you'll add conversations. And then I would let them know you'll have this long to have this discussion. And then when we come back as a whole group, you'll share out 2 important items. And so then the page would look like this, a column for each group so that they could also get ideas from the other groups while they were writing their responses. And then I had the student's name, so I knew who was where. And so I would provide the prompts and the guidance, and then they would have the discussions and capture them on the Google Docs. So again, I could jump in if there were any misunderstandings or any confusion. The big thing is you have to make it stick. So you want to make sure that everybody participates, everyone has a reason to stay engaged and paying attention. And to do that and to check to make sure everyone understood, you have to have some kind of follow-up activity. Sometimes it was like a quick quiz with a couple of questions. Sometimes it was a written reflection on, what were your big takeaways? Sometimes it was as simple as an exit ticket where I had just a couple of questions about what we did today. Sometimes it was an assignment. For example, with that Stalin piece, their task was to then find an article from their content area that was 1 to 2 pages long and come up with text-dependent questions for that article. So you want to make it stick, and you want to make sure that they are they've actually mastered the content. It also gets more buy-in, and it gives them a reason to pay attention and participate and be active learners. So what does this look like? In my remote classrooms, it was easy. Everybody was in a breakout room. You can pre-assign the groups so you can have a diverse mix of students. You can use Google Docs to have them document the discussions. And again, like I was saying before, those Google Docs are a great way to be able to jump in when they get off track or they don't understand. There's also some magic in this too. I knew a number of the students from the spring when I adjuncted and taught a course. And some students that never spoke up in class and didn't raise their hands, they were very, I would jump in on a Zoom room and they would be the ones leading the discussion. And so just being in a smaller group empowered them to become leaders and more engaged in the conversation. If we had been in a traditional classroom or even a traditional Zoom class, these are not students that would have raised their hands. I don't require cameras to be on because of equity issues, but I would find that even though most of my students would keep their cameras off during whole group online sessions, many of them turned them on for their small group discussions, which was really nice to see too. So it also creates a sense of classroom community and an opportunity to talk to their classmates and get to know them better. Hybrid was entertaining. I had some classes that ran with remote students and some in-person students. And so for those classes, I did it one of two ways, depending on how many remote students I had. If I had students that were quarantining or for some other reason couldn't come and they were typically a live student, then if there were 1 or 2 of them, I would give them a buddy, and that buddy would be responsible for bringing them into the Zoom, the live discussion in the classroom, as well as the rest of the class as well. If I had enough, I would have a separate Zoom breakout room going for my online students and separate groups with my in-person students. For in-person, I am going to keep using Google Docs to track those discussions. For this year, obviously, it's good to have fewer shared materials and not having to pass out papers, but using Google Docs lets me see their discussions and they can access them later. They can also see the ideas from their other classmates. In our rooms, all the rooms that I've been teaching and my students have been able to easily pair share. There's been somebody close enough they could pair share. So sometimes our groups were as small as 2. In other classrooms, they were set up where there'd be 3 or 4 around a table, obviously very spaced out. So it kind of depended on what classroom I was teaching in. When the weather was nicer, we went outside to have these small group discussions. But really, the big thing I'm taking away from all of this is the power of using those Google Docs or other shared documents to write down and track those discussions, and the importance of having that follow-up activity because it keeps them accountable for mastery and understanding the material. And then I've got any questions that I'm sure we'll do all together, and then my contact information.